الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So, continue discussing the book Mulakhas Al-Fiqhy by Shaykh Salih Fawzan Hafidullah, and continue discussing concerning matter related to ahkam al-mu'amalat, and of those ahkam regarding al-buyu, business transaction, and different type of transactions that are carried out. So we'll be picking up from where we had stopped in the last lesson, where in the lesson of last week we discussed concerning matters regarding mazara'a or masaqa. So regarding concerning that crops, and then today inshallah we'll be discussing concerning ahkam ijara. Aywa.
Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Qala ma'allif hafidahullah. Chapter 2, page number 147, renting things and hiring people's services, ijara. The contracts of renting and hiring continually recur in the lives of people concerning their different interests and their daily, monthly, and yearly dealings. Thus, it is important to know the rulings pertaining to such dealings, for all people's dealings, wherever and whenever they are codified in Sharia Islamic law in accordance with legal norms which guard interests and put an end to harm. Ijara means renting something or hiring someone's services in return for a certain payment. Allah exalted He says, Moses said, if you wished, you could have taken it for a payment. Surah Kaf, ayat number 77. According to Muslim jurists, ijara is defined as follows: a lease for a lawful, identified use of either an identified present or described anticipated thing for a specified purpose and for a known period of time, or a hiring agreement for the performance of a certain service in return for a specified compensation.
So they mentioned regarding concerning the author Hafidullah that started concerning discussing these type of transactions that I mentioned here, that is titled as ahkam al-ijara. So of those things that ulama they mentioned regarding ijara that involve concerning things of rental, things that are rented, and also hiring of things. So regarding concerning that these are things that these type of transaction people are involved in. Some people more often than other, but they occur on a regular basis. So sometimes for some people it occurs on a daily basis, some monthly, yearly, certain time in their life that they'll go through this transaction. So Islam that I've mentioned regarding, so Islam have placed certain conditions and guidelines regarding doing these things in a way which is for the betterment of those involved. So these are things I mentioned regarding concerning that ahkam من إجارة من أحكام التي يحتاجها الإنسان أو الناس في مصالحهم الدنيوية. So these are matter regarding people benefiting of concerning the things of the dunya, but also Islam putting certain guidelines and certain criteria in place to ensure that things are done properly and correctly. Aywa.
The aforesaid general definition comprises most of the validity conditions for ijara as well as its types. The phrase a lease for a use implies that the hiring of slaves is not included in ijara, for it is rather selling than hiring or renting in this case. The word lawful excludes all kinds of renting and hiring for unlawful use, like adultery, for example. The phrase identified use excludes any unknown benefit or use through ijara, in which case the lease becomes invalid. The phrase a lawful identified use of either an identified present or described anticipated thing or a hiring agreement for the performance of a certain service indicates that ijara is of two types. Firstly, ijara can be for the use of an identified present or described anticipated thing. An example of renting an identified thing is when a landlord says, I rent you this house. while an example of renting a described thing is when a owner of a pack animal who rents it says, I rent you a pack animal of such and such a description for transporting or riding. Secondly,
I mentioned it regarding concerning al-mawsuf by way of at times that thing is not present. So the person giving some form of description regarding concerning that type of service that a person is offering. So you'll give some form of description regarding the service or that is being given. Aywa.
Secondly, ijara can also be hiring someone for performing a specific service. Like for example, someone who hires another to drive him to such and such a place or to build him a wall or the like. The phrase for a known period of time means that the rent period should be specified, a day or a month, etc. The phrase for a specified compensation indicates the necessity of specifying the payment for renting something or hiring someone. Thus, all the validity conditions of the two types of ijara can be summarized in the following. The lease has to be related to the use of the object, not the object itself. This use of the object should be lawful. The purpose of renting should be known. If the rent object is not identified present, it should agree with the description of its owner. The rent period should be specified. The rental payment should be specified. The valid ijara is permissible according to the Quran and the Sunnah and the juristic consensus. Allah exalted be, He says, and if they breastfeed for you, then give them their payment. Surah At-Talaq, ayat number 6. Allah also says, Moses said, if you wished, you could have taken for it a payment. Surah Kaf, ayat 77. The Prophet ﷺ also hired a man to show him the way during his immigration from Mecca to Medina. Ibn al-Mundir stated that the jurists unanimously agree on the permissibility of ijara, renting something or hiring someone's services. Moreover, ijara is a human necessity as there is need for the benefits of rent as much as there is a need for the objects of rent.
Hey, they mentioned regarding concerning of those things that he clarified regarding what is ijara, that he mentioned regarding concerning that the payment should be known. That also of those things that the payment that should be somewhat known. But ulama discussed a message regarding concerning that if it is not clear or was not specified as regarding concerning the payment. So both agree upon something, but they didn't per se specify what would be the payment, the amount, the miqdar. Is this transaction valid or not? So they mentioned according to the method of the Hanabila regarding if the amount was not specified at the time of forming the agreement, that I mentioned according to the method of the Hanabila, they have one of the opposition. I mentioned that this type of because the payment was not per se specified, then that act is not considered to be valid. The act is not considered to be valid as it forfeit one of the conditions, which is that the payment should be known. Whatever the payment is, it should be known. Then I mentioned that that's one view of the madhahib of the Hanabila. A second view that mentioned on this concern that the right of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, أنه إذا تمت, that if the task was completed, the task was completed as agreed upon by both parties, but they did not specify the payment, then they mentioned that the person that agreement is still considered to be valid. What they need to do is to pay the person what would be the cost or the run or the cost of that thing, what would be concerned with the general cost of that item. Clear? So in making up, so rather instead of that contract is invalid, rather the person would be paid as to what would be the going cost or the going rate for that particular task that was completed. As a person, they didn't specify what's the payment or how much is the payment to be given to the person. And they mentioned at the call of Ibn Qayyim rahimullah that the second view is that even though they did not agree upon a specific payment, the deal is still considered to be valid, but the person is to be paid what would be the going rate for what he did, for the service that he performed. Aywa.
It is permissible to hire a person for a certain job, such as for tailoring a garment, building a wall, or for guiding one through one's way. It is stated in the Sahih al-Bukhari that Aisha radiallahu anha narrated in the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's hijrah, immigration to Medina. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him, employed Abdullah ibn Urayqid al-Laythi as a guide. He was an expert guide. It is impermissible to rent houses, shops and stores for committing sins, such as selling intoxicants or forbidding things like tobacco or making pictures, as renting here is considered an assistance in committing sins.
Hey, so that was thing that they discuss here, concerned that, that in case it's concerned that is something which is allowed, and the author or the Shah mentioned that there's evidence for this from the Quran, also from the Sunnah, and also Ijma. So regarding concerning al-ijara, that this type of rental and hiring, that is something which is agreed upon between the ulama, based upon text that is found in the Quran, the Sunnah, and also agreement between the ulama, and that it is something which is allowed. That the Prophet ﷺ himself also did of it. The Prophet ﷺ also had cases where he hired people for certain tasks. So they mentioned regarding concerning hadith in Sahih Bukhari, the hadith of Aisha anha, regarding concerning the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr, that he hired someone as a guide, and that was concerning their hijrah from Mecca to Medina, and that person also then a Muslim. So it shows regarding concerning hiring of others, and at times even, and so it showed the permissibility of this, and the Prophet ﷺ himself also he did this. Then also he mentioned that after this, regarding in certain cases that it is certain things that is not allowed to be hired, certain things that are not allowed to be hired, and he mentioned regarding concerning a person wants to hire or to rent a store, a shop, where the person knows is clear that what to be done is thing which is ma'asi, and especially those things that are agreed upon and well established. So the person letting or renting a store, the store space for a person to sell alcohol, then that is not allowed. As mentioned, وَلَا تَعَاوُنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ, that one should not cooperate in those things of ithim, things of sinfulness, and also things of transgression. So they give an example regarding that things of ma'asi, that it is not allowed concerning assisting people in carrying out those things and renting things for that purpose. Aywa. Ay.
So what degree does the person who's renting that property have to go to verify whether the person's going to, what the person, say for example, someone's got a commercial unit, he's got a shop, the shop's empty, and Fulan comes and says, look, I want to rent your shop. What degree of background checks you have to do to see what they're going to be selling in that?
And so that would be a thing that a person that Muslim then you will ask, so that regarding concerning what are the things that you intend to sell. So of the thing that you will ask that the person who are interested, that they clarify regarding what they intend to sell. So that will be of those things that he has to take into account. That what are the type of item, as he's not allowed to rent that commercial space for anything to be done, as there's certain restriction that he has to follow. Aywa. So he just ask or put some system in place where the person has to identify the type of thing that he intend to do in that space.
It is permissible for a tenant to rent what he has rented to someone else to make use of, for the tenant is considered a temporary owner of what he rents. Thus, it is permissible for him to use it or let someone else use it instead. Still, the second tenant must use the rented object in the way of the first, or in a better way. For example, a tenant of a house can rent it to another tenant provided that the latter uses it for living therein or for a less damaging use. However, it is impermissible for him to rent the place for someone who will use it for a factory or laboratory.
Okay, so the mention of this, the main of this, or the shahid from this, that it shows the permissibility of a person also who have rented something, that an opposition of that thing, even though it is being rented, but also they can rent it off to someone else. So it shows the permissibility of this. Aywa.
It is impermissible to hire someone to perform acts of worship or piety that bring one near to Allah, such as performing Hajj pilgrimage on one's behalf or announcing the prayer call. This is because such deeds are individually performed to draw one closer to Allah and receiving wages for them makes them far away from being acts of worship. However, it is permissible to receive financial support from the Muslims' public treasury for acts of transcending benefits, such as performing Hajj, announcing prayer call, leading people in prayer, teaching the Quran and fiqh, judging and delivering fatwa. Receiving payment in such cases is not a kind of compensation, but rather a help to perform acts of obedience. This does not void such pious and righteous acts, nor does it affect the sincerity of their performance.
Okay, so of those discussed regarding of those matters that are under this are mentioned regarding la yusay al-ijara, al-amal, al-ibadah, wal-qurba. So I mentioned that person of a service that this type of service regarding certain service regarding certain acts of ibadah, that a person that my service is that I perform salat on behalf of people, then this type of service is not to be offered. So that type of service or that type of transaction is not considered to be a valid one. So then I mentioned regarding concern that as for other things can be done, that the person is somewhat assisted, given certain assistance by way of the state to perform certain acts that others will benefit. So the person acting as the imam, that is not per se getting a wages or a salary, but is getting that an assistance to carry out that role. Also of those that they mentioned regarding for the people to teach Quran, also al-fiqh and the likes, that these things, that the correct view of the ulama, that these things the person can be assisted or get some assistance regarding from the state or from those in authority to carry out these things, as these things are for the general welfare of also other benefit, the person personally benefit, but also others benefit. Aywa.
Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, may Allah have mercy on him, said,
Because with this matter, also concerning teaching people Islam and all that, that is something that the general rule I mentioned is something that can be done. But not in a case where it becomes problematic. In the case where a person stipulates, for example, a person to teach in a masjid or give a lecture in a particular place, and they stipulate that for me to do that lecture or to do the lesson, I have to get X amount. They have a fee that they give. For example, so the person said, yeah, I'll be paid £100 to do that lecture. And his friend said, and if not, I'm not doing it. Then that's a problem. That's a problem regarding concerning. So even though it shows concerning a person regarding his level of ikhlas is problematic, and also he has turned concerning teaching of Islam into something which is a commercial practice. He has turned into a business. So those things the one should avoid. One should avoid regarding the person stipulating, for me to carry out this, I must be paid. Then that's a problem. If you are not paid, compensated, and they also have a fee, a certain amount, if not, they will not do those lessons, then that's a problem. Aywa.
Faqihs unanimously agree on the difference between hiring to perform various acts of worship and granting financial support for their performers. Giving provision to fighters, judges, prayer callers, and imams is undisputedly permissible. As for hiring someone to perform such acts of worship on one's behalf, it is impermissible according to most of them, i.e. Muslim scholars.
It's for someone to get those acts on your behalf. You're gonna pay someone to fast on your behalf. Then that's la yajuz. Then that's not allowed. Aywa.
Ibn Taymiyyah also said, in such cases, whatever is taken from the Muslims' public treasury is not a kind of compensation or wages, but it is provision for helping in performing such acts of obedience. Whoever uses such a financial support for working such acts for the sake of Allah will be rewarded, and what he is granted from the Muslims' public treasury will be regarded as an aid in performing such acts of worship.
So that's concerning acts of ibadah regarding that carrying out on those things on behalf of others for a fee. So you might have concern that maybe was mentioned at some point regarding that a service that is a person having a service that I perform Hajj on behalf of others. Or Umrah. So a person who unable or so those type of things become problematic regarding concerning as a service that a person put himself forward, have a group of people saying that we are the one provide the service regarding if a person is unable to perform Hajj or Umrah, you can hire our service to perform this on your behalf. Then it's become a problem. One, that was said from the Salaf, is this known that the Salaf practice this? Is this known? And also regarding concerning the evil that's and then also second regarding what's the aqwal of the ulama on this matter? What's the aqwal, the statement and the advice of the ulama on this matter? So those things that certain things kind of somewhat try to avoid. And even today you find concern that so you have those things to be mindful of. Those things to be mindful of.
Is there any way that becomes permissible? Because there is people in Saudi that is it paying them to do it, or is that impermissible, or could you reimburse their expenses?
You have a case where we said, for example, of a person that they can afford Hajj, but due to their circumstance they are unable. They are very ill, but they are unable to make the journey themselves because of their condition. So they can pay for someone to do it on their behalf. So for that person to find someone who fulfill the criteria that they can perform it on their behalf, right? But in the case now, so you have that case with a person that you find someone, you're the one who's seeking to find someone who can fulfill it on your behalf because you're unable, right? Then the next case is that a person that's a service, they're providing that service. So the person says, no, we are providing a service that those who wish, we can perform Hajj or Umrah on behalf of anyone. But they'll have concerns. So what they said, and they'll calculate whatever that fee cost would be. It may be that it covers everything, but or they said may include also covering all things plus also their time. Maybe in all those things are included as a part of the fee. Then that becomes something that needs to be looked at.
So it's the minute they try to make a profit.
It becomes a business. They become like a business, so that becomes something which is, you understand, that needs to be looked at.
But in the case, let's say, for example, there may be a brother who's working or studying in Saudi, and his parents may be in the UK and unable to perform Hajj due to physical or medical reasons. In that circumstance, because I doubt there's going to be some kind of fee, some kind of profit being made, it's okay for him to do it.
Yeah, like a person here, they're very elderly, they have a family member or someone, they said, okay, I know that because we can afford to go, we have the finance, but because of our personal situation, circumstance, we're unable. So in that case, yes, you understand, it's advisable that a person can perform Hajj and Umrah on your behalf. And you can pay, you can pay for that. You pay, but you facilitate for the person. So the flights, depending on their flights, their accommodations, you facilitate for that person, right? But in that case, it's not a person advertising as a business. Is that them, because of the situation that they are asking someone to do it on their behalf. So that the next side is the person who's offering this as a business. That now become the issue. Aywa.
The duties of a lessor and a lease. A lessor has to do whatever can help the leasee to benefit.
But next thing become popular in present day, what we have mentioned, that is that concerning Islamic study in the West, that you find that a lot of this now Islamic-based, instead Islamic studies or teaching where you have institutes, but many of whom they charge. The person want to study Islam, that you find now institutes that are there or online or whatever. But they will charge people to gain this knowledge. So even said that I'm more inclined towards that basic stuff of Islam, basic knowledge. No one should charge for this, because it's basic stuff for a person to know his deen. So learn the basic things of Islam, then a person, they should be majana, they should be free for anyone. But as for a person to gain the basic stuff, they have to pay, then that doesn't rest well with me as a person. And a person, you understand, so, and most of the people who have studied Islam in the West, they'll study Islam free, majanan. There was no cost involved. You understand? So I said, so make a distinction between the basic Islam and also the person will study at an advanced level. Then that's a different thing. But for the basic stuff, it should be, if you find the basic stuff, is the thing that you'll find in most masajid, it's already there. But the institute or online educational, they may offer certificate. And the structure may understand, but the thing of charging for the basic knowledge of Islam, you understand, في قلبي يعني شيء. In my heart, there's something, it doesn't sit well with me.
Would you classify learning to read Quran as basic?
Let me say, it varies.
Yes.
It varies. Yes, and he said learning of Arabic, and he said to learn basic Quran, it could be, he said a person could see it as class as lastly learning the language, but the language as a tool to learn the Quran. You understand? So like learning a language. So like you say, you can put, but basic Aqidah, basic fiqh. You understand? So those things, you understand, as the basic stuff. You understand? Even said the basic Quran learning, what they call, Qaida and all that. You understand? The people should have some rahmah upon the people. And make it more open, where it's accessible to all. Without per se, there's a charge involved. As for the person who wants to learn more advanced level of Islam, more in-depth study, yes, then maybe that could be, you understand, then that's could be looked at because the person wants something further than what is the basic. So those things, aywa.
A lessor has to do whatever can help the leasee to benefit from the object of rent, such as fixing the rented car or preparing it for working and freight, and reconstructing the rented house and fixing whatever is damaged therein and preparing its utilities for use. When the period of rent is over, a leasee has to fix whatever damages he has caused. Ijara, renting, is a binding contract for the two parties, the lessor and the leasee, for it is regarded as a kind of sell, so the judgments of sell applies to it. A lessor or leasee cannot cancel the lease except with the consent of the other. But if a certain defect appears about which the leasee has not been informed before signing the contract, he has the right to cancel it. The lessor is obliged to hand over the object of rent to the leasee and to enable him to utilize it. If the lessor rents something and then prevents the leasee from using it during all or some of the period of rent, he has no right to receive all or some of the rental, for he has not handed the leasee what the lease has stated. If the lessor enables the leasee to utilize the object of rent but did not take the rent during all or some of the periods of lease, full rent is due upon the leasee. This is because the lease is a binding one. Thus, what is stated therein should be carried out. Rental is the right of the lessor, while utilization is the right of the leasee. Two cases in which the lease can be cancelled.
So if there's a lease involved that is agreed upon, which is now the practice of today's time, that if there's something written and agreed upon by way of a lease and signed by all the parties involved, then a person that each should try to fulfill the agreement. So even though the person who is leasing or the leasing land may not, or one leasing may not utilize everything, but the fact that he agreed that for a certain time I'll pay, for example, a certain amount, then he has to fulfill it, whether he did the thing that he intended or not. But the fact that he leased that thing with that agreement, then it should be fulfilled. Aywa.
First, when the object of rent is damaged, as in the case when one rents a riding animal, then it dies, or a house and then it collapses, or a land for cultivation and then it becomes deprived of water. Second, when the purpose of renting or hiring is no longer there, as in the case when a person hires or sends for a physician to treat him and then he becomes well before the physician treats him. In such a case, the hiring agreement is cancelled because its purpose is no longer there.
And also regarding concerning lease, that some of these things may changes as time change. So the general concern that the general principles are still the outline the Sharia. We might find that in contemporary times that in certain type of lease or hiring that usually have a contract is in place. So those things that even concern even between us, sometimes as Muslim between ourselves, we sometimes that we ignore these these things that are documented. That is the normal practice that is applied today. And sometimes we do things verbal, and then sometimes the verbal kind of somewhat, it goes to the advantage or disadvantage of one over the other. So certain things that is better, that it is writing, as the normal practice of today. Sometimes with certain things that also have to be overseen, or have to be read over by a solicitor/lawyer, then also we should not ignore those things. Because the general concern is there for the best interest of all. And if that's the norm of that society, where certain things require that it is advisable strongly or in what is in place, that it should be looked over by a solicitor, then we should not ignore those things. We should not ignore those things. Aywa.
When someone is hired for a certain work and he becomes ill, someone else has to be hired at his expense to replace him, unless it is stipulated that the work should be done by the original hired person. This is because the purpose of hiring may not be achieved through another person. In this case, the hirer does not have to accept the work of a person other than the one who he has hired, but he is given the option either to wait until the hired person gets well or to cancel the contract because he cannot get his right.
As concerned if a person hire an individual, a specific person, and you want the job to be done only by him, but certain things might arise. The person became ill. Then either you wait until the person recover, then complete the job because you want only him to do that job. So if anything was to occur, then you wait until that person because you want only that person to carry out that task. Then that's the thing. The person either wait or you undo the contract. Aywa.
A hired person is of two kinds. Number one, private hired person, one who is hired for a specific period of time during which all his work is a due right only to one person, the one who hires him, with no partners such as a servant or a driver. Number two, public hired person, one whose usefulness is estimated according to his work, which is not dedicated to one person, but he can work for more than one person at a time, such as a tailor. A private hired person is not financially liable for what he damages by mistake during his work, such as the case when the machine or the tool he uses is damaged. This is because he is regarded as the owner's deputy, thus he is not to ask for recompense. However, he is to compensate whatever he damages out of negligence, transgression, and misuse. For a public hired person, he is financially liable for whatever he damages because he does not deserve his payment except through the accomplishment of his work. Hence, he is financially liable for his work, and whatever he damages falls under his liability. The payment of the hired person becomes due through the hiring contract. He cannot ask for his wages except after delivering the work, which is regarded as his obligation, accomplishing the service, or handing over the object of rent in case of renting or hiring after the period of rent is over, provided there is no hindrance. This is because the hired person is paid his due compensation after finishing his work or delivering what is in his responsibility. In fact, the payment for renting or hiring is a kind of compensation, so it is not due except after delivery of the compensatory object, be it a service or an object. A hired person has to perfect and complete his work. He is forbidden to cheat or deceive. He also has to continue to work during the period he is hired in, and he is not to waste any time during the period without working. A hired person has to fear Allah while performing his due work.
He did not waste time during the time that he's working, meaning what?
Not to slack off, I guess.
Allah musta'an. Aywa.
On the other hand, the duty of a hirer is to pay.
But sometimes a person might be hired for a task, and he delays things so he can be paid more. So you have those things that may occur. So the person that he tries to fulfill the task as quick as possible. Try to fulfill the task as quick as possible without unnecessary delays. Aywa.
What if that person's been given a task, but the task is to be delivered within a program? So, for instance, there's 9 months to complete.
Okay.
So as long as
So that's different. So you have case, for example, that is given a certain time, that you have a particular task, and the time factor to be given that the final date of completion is 9 months. But if the person is able to can finish it, he knows his ability, he could complete a task in 5. But he's given 9. Sometimes if he's still delayed until he reach the deadline time, then he's still within, because that's the agreement, he's still within target of what was agreed upon initially.
On the other hand, the duty of a hirer is to pay the person whom he hires his complete wages upon finishing the work he is hired to do. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Give the labourer his wages before his sweat is dry," i.e. immediately after he finishes his work.
They mentioned concerning the Shaykh Fawzan, Hafidullah, that he mentioned regarding concerning of those things that the person who's the hired person, the ajir, the person who is being hired, as to him being mindful of his task, right, and what is to fulfill. And then he mentioned next also given a form of like advice regarding the person who is the mustajir, the person who's hiring someone. So the person who's the boss, the one who's hiring the person, that also of those things that when the person has completed his task, as soon as he has completed his task, is for the person to be paid. Then I mentioned the hadith concerning that a'tu al-ajir ajruhu qabla an yajaf araquhu. That the hadith here mentioned, this hadith that is mentioned in the Ibn Majah, and this hadith that there's some discussion regarding this hadith. Where the hadith mentioned that you should pay the person before his sweat dries. So the hadith that I mentioned, the hadith al-Hasan li ghayri. So the hadith itself, as a hadith, the hadith by itself it is weak, but with other supporting other hadith of that topic makes it strong. But the hadith itself, by itself, individual by itself, is a hadith which is weak, based upon one of the narrators that sent in the hadith, that is Abdul Rahman ibn Zayd ibn Aslam, that is a weak narrator, and they mention the hadith is more so a mursal, with a discount, is more mursal, but based upon this, they mention this hadith, it is Hasan li ghayri. So it's Hasan li ghayri, so it is considered to be a good hadith with the support of other hadith, but it by itself, it is weak. Aywa.
Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu also narrated that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Allah exalted be he says, "I will be against 3 persons on the day of judgment, and I defeat whomever I am against on the day of judgment. One who makes a covenant in my name, but he proves treacherous. One who sells a free person as a slave and eats the price. And one who employs a labourer and gets the full work done by him, but does not pay him his wages."
Yes, that hadith that strengthens. So this hadith that they mentioned in the Bukhari, that strengthened the hadith that was mentioned previously. Aywa. So it shows that regarding even by way of the employer, that also for them to be very mindful regarding this. So for the person, the employer, that for them regarding those who are being employed by them, that to be mindful regarding that the person is giving their service, and you also, and from their side, from their part, and also you, the employer, that you're supposed to compensate the person by paying their wages, and to try to do so on time, and also give the person that which is satisfactory. So pay the person which is a satisfactory wages. So in today's time now we have what they call regarding concerning setting the minimum wages. So you have like in certain countries you have what they call minimum wage, certain tasks that there's a minimum wage to it. It may vary even in some country from one city to another. But in certain countries, kind of somewhat regarding certain tasks, you have certain minimum wage that the person is not allowed to pay below this. So that's concerning practice that we have today, but generally concerning the Muslim employer, that he tries to pay the person what is acceptable for the task that is being given, without trying to pay the person on the person's wages. And Allah understand that of some of the Muslim, that some of the story that you hear of Muslims employer that they're always trying to, some of them, pay less. Yeah, they're always trying to pay less. For Allah Mustan.
You see that situation there, is that like, you know the ayats in Wailul lil Mutaffifin?
Hey, all of that, yeah.
Giving less than due.
Hey, so I said all those things. So, but the person, so each may vary from what we might call as minimum wage, meaning that task, that it may vary from one country to another country regarding that task, and what's considered to be the minimum wage. But they should try to stay within that which is reasonable and acceptable based upon that societal environment, and not to undercut or underpay the employee. There you are.
The work of a hired person, a labourer, is a trust in his responsibility. He has to perform and accomplish his duty perfectly, and sincerely. On the other hand, the wages of a hired person is a debt and a duty on the part of the hirer, which is incumbent upon him to fulfill without procrastination or injustice. And Allah exalted be, He knows best.
There you are. So that the author, Hafidullah, have ended this discussion regarding al-ijara. So that inshallah ta'ala will end for today and continue regarding the other matters that are covered in the next chapter. Wabillahi ta'ala tawfiq. Aywa.
Question. So this kind of thing came up on the news. If you are hired to do a job, for instance, either a contractor or a permanent hired person, can you say, because okay, I can have some time on the side there, I can also get another contract on the side, so I'm doing two contracts at the same time?
So that can happen. You have sometimes they have people who work more than one job. So depending, sometimes if you have a job where, sometimes it varies. If you have the person have a job where that the job that is allowed, is that that leeway within that job. We can do more than one task at the same time. So as long as he does fulfill each accordingly.
But it's the time.
Sometimes if the time, for example, the person have a job that says from 9 to 5, you're supposed to be at work. From 9 to 5, he's supposed to fulfill that. But the person he's working from home. He's working from home, but he has 9 to 5 where at 9 he's supposed to be on the computer or already until 5 regarding that, and you're being paid for that time. But the person, because he's at home, then he's doing, you understand, he's working at second job, you understand, during that time, then that's a problem. Even if he's fulfilling, because he's being paid, you understand, unless he's because he's a contractor that it is, understand that he's a contractor who is flexible. But if he's, for example, that his contract that he has with this company, that we're paying you from 9 to 5, and you're supposed to be on your computer or whatever for that time, then you're supposed to stick to that. You understand? Unless the person himself is, I've said, a freelance, but if he's contracted to be that at that time, then if that person says, I'm a bus driver and I'm doing Uber at the same time. Yeah, you understand? It doesn't work.
I think it depends on your contractual conditions, because some people can have multiple clients through a business name. I run through a business. There's no legalities against how many clients I can have.
That's what I'm saying, because you're freelance. Yeah, so then that's different.
You're not freelance, you're contractor.
But you say that
If
For example, if your client said, okay, I'm paying you, even though you're a freelance contractor, one client said, okay, we want for you to work for us, but we want the contracted time, our agreement is that from 9 to 5, you give all that time to us, from Monday to Friday.
I don't know what it says. I don't get paid by a client.
No,
I get paid by the middleman.
No, I'm not saying your case in particular.
say, for example, you've got your client basis, your Monday, I would like you to consult for me from 9 to 5. Can't then go and get another client that says that they want to.
Yeah, at the same time.
Let me say to you, what if you only have one meetings or no meetings so many of these days? You're just sitting around doing nothing.
Even from your contracted hours and what they're paying you for, you understand that you become an employee of them. You understand, between that hours, whether you're doing a task or not, you're still contracted to You understand? It's like, for example, the next is a person's contract. You may even said a person contracted to be the imam for the masjid. You understand? But imamship of them is that he's contracted to be a part to be in the masjid from 12 till 8. Just an example. Nam, but in that day, you, for example, you lead maybe 3 salat. But in between, so the salat, for example, at 1 o'clock, one at 5, and the other one at 8. Then he finished. But in between, you understand, he's doing other things. He's doing Uber. But he's being paid, you understand, regarding concern being the masjid where time and also his service also to do counseling, to do all these type of things. So he should be inside the premises doing those, even though sometimes he might have no client or nothing being done, right? But he should still be on call in the building to fulfill his duty because he's contracted for.
You see, for instance,
Are we still being recorded?
No, no.
because you know sometimes when you freelance,
Hey.
you know,